She sits on the curb with her guitar across her knees like it's the only honest thing she owns. Bare feet tucked under a threadbare skirt, hair braided into a single rope that keeps falling loose when the wind picks up. The city moves around her in indifferent streams. High heels, delivery bikes, a dog walker with 2 poodles, and the world feels too loud for a small voice. "If I sing well, will you feed me?" she asks, not to the crowd but to the young man who sits 2 paces away, polishing shoes from a battered tin. His name is Julien, and his hands are always stained with the dust of the streets. His eyes never are. He looks up, gives the same half-smile he keeps for everyone, crooked, steady, full of a faith that doesn't need words. "Only if you promise to make them cry," Julien says, dry as a winter leaf. He taps a rhythm on the box beside him. "Make them stop and listen." She shakes her head. Hunger is a bargaining chip she learned to use for shelter, not for applause. Still, she lifts her fingers to the frets, and a note finds its own clean line out into the noise. The sound is thin at first, like a thread, then the thread pulls taut, and something in the city leans in. Coins clink into her open case. A man with a briefcase drops one and moves along. A woman with a stroller stops, takes out a phone, watches for a moment, then keeps walking. People give what they can spare and return to their own particulars. But the song keeps going, small but uncompromising, as if the guitar remembers a home she can't. They call her Clemence because of a folded scrap of paper sewn into her coat, a name without a family and with more elbows than edges. People in the neighborhood know her by the slouch of the guitar case, by the scar on her knuckle, by the way she hums under her breath when snow is coming. She knows the rhythm of this corner like it is her second skin. The bus that smells of old coffee at noon, the trash truck's metallic sigh at 2 in the morning, the woman who leaves stale bread by the lamppost on Sundays. Julien watches as an expensive car slows at the curb. It gleams like it has no fingerprints. 2 people step out, and the city seems to rearrange to make room for them. They are careful about how they move through the noise. Hands clean, eyes softer than the brass of their watch. The woman carries a small leather case. The man wears a coat that cost more than Clemence has seen in a lifetime. They stop to listen. The woman kneels as if the curb and Clemence are of equal value. Her voice is warm. "That was beautiful," she says. "Do you sing often?" Clemence pauses. Georgos, the violinist who plays 3 blocks down, once told her not to meet strangers with words, because words get used. But hunger is a clever teacher. It persuades mouths to be honest. She shrugs. When people listen, the man takes in the guitar, the hands, the bare feet, the way her throat works as she swallows a laugh that could be called pride. He reaches into his conductor's bag and pulls out a card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. The word on the top is the kind of word that promises light. Echo stage. A show, the man says. A search for voices. He says it like he's offering her the chance to step into a different kind of noise. She looks at the card. The paper is white and impossible. She fumbles it with fingers that shake for reasons other than cold. Her throat is a narrow place that holds back 2 decades of smaller defeats. The woman, Leia, she will later learn, smiles in a way that makes her feel seen, not as a spectacle, but as another human who might be tired of the city's unkindness. "Would you like to audition?" Leia asks. "We think your voice should be heard by more people." Clemence says nothing. Her life for the last many winters has been a sequence of silences and quick decisions. The card is an invitation that smells like a road. She glances at Julien. His hands are wrapped around a stick of gum. He gives the tiniest nod, the kind that says, "Go." When the choice is between the curb and what might be, she chooses the possibility of a meal with the back of her throat as a prayer. She takes the card. The corner is sharp in her palm. "Okay," she whispers. She does not know what audition will ask of her beyond a song. She does not know what the lights will do to the face she keeps hidden. She only knows that the card says, in small print, "Travel and accommodations provided." The woman, Leia, and the man, Pierre, offer their car without ceremony. It is the kind of kindness that is not performative. They do not film the moment, do not ask for a selfie. They watch her settle into the back seat as if they understand the weight of being careful. The city recedes like scenery. Julien stays on the curb until the brake lights blink out of sight. He slips a small cloth into Clemence's hand before the door clicks closed. "So you don't forget home," he says. "Those hands remember how to keep the music alive." She tucks the rag into the guitar case as if it were a promise. At the 49th Street underpass, She closes her eyes and hums a lullaby no one taught her. The words taste like ash and honey. Sleep under the chestnut tree, little one, and when storms come, remember the river keeps you safe. It's a phrase that has been with her longer than any memory of a bed. Sometimes she thinks it is nonsense, and sometimes she thinks it is a map. When the car stops, she nearly leaves the guitar in the lobby. The building where Echo Stage stages its televised auditions is glass and shadow, and the kind of bright that doesn't invite anyone in. It requires you to be polished. Cameras wink from windows like curious birds. Security checks her bag, but not her hands. The producer's assistants guide her with clipped smiles. A makeup artist touches the corners of her eyes with a light hand that feels shockingly like respect. The rooms behind the stage are an ecosystem of nerves.
Mirrors with light bulbs add 10 years. Sofas swallow size. A corridor smells of coffee and hairspray. Contestants move in swarms, some young and rehearsed, some older and desperate. They cluster in pods like a flock waiting for numbers. Many of them are polished, the sort of talent packaged by private lessons and judicious endorsements. At least one of them watches Clemence with the thin tilt of someone already convinced of a hierarchy. Amandine is one of those polished people. She is tall and cold and wears a dress that could cut. There is a practiced tilt to her laugh and a glance that measures and discards. When Clemence enters the room clutching her guitar, Amandine's eyes flick from the instrument to the feet, to the fabric, to the dirt at the hem of the skirt, a litany of things for her to judge. She smiles with her teeth and offers, in the way of privileged rivals, an invitation to discomfort. "You're not supposed to perform like that," Amandine says, voice coated in the kind of condescension luxury buys. "This is television. You need polish." It is not the first time Clemence meets an opinion shaped like a threat. She remembers a teacher in a temporary shelter who once said, "Talent without grooming is like a seed left in a bottle." They meant well. Clemence smiles a small, careful smile that says she knows how to be invisible until it's useful. Martin is the man who sees such things as leverage. He is the owner-producer of Echo Stage, a figure that moves like oil through water in the building, smooth, slick, designed to gloss over edges. He has a voice that could cut through a crowd and make them applaud him for it. He has a tongue that doesn't care how it wounds. His public face is charming in a kind of sharp dental way. Behind closed doors, he is decisive, and in the way big lights require, merciless about stories. "Authenticity is currency," Martin tells his production team over the hum of monitors. "We sell moments people will talk about. People will love her story if it's honest, or they'll despise it. Either way, they'll watch." He watches Clemence from his booth like a man watching a chess game. He frowns at the threadbare guitar and at the way she carries herself. He orders the wardrobe crew to prep a dress that will make her look television ready. He tells the sound team to make sure her microphone is clipped just so. The engineers headache over the raw grit in her voice, the same grit that makes it feel like glass against glass. In the days that follow, a whirlwind condensed into hours, Clemence learns the choreography of staged hope. There are rehearsals, short and efficient. There are television lessons, where to stand, when to smile, how to meet the camera like a friend. There is a room where contestants are encouraged to tell their story arc into a camera. Often they ask for the painful detail, because pain translates into tears on cue, and television loves a tear that can be measured in ratings. She refuses to vamp that pain. When a producer asks if she would elaborate on the worst night she remembers, she shakes her head. "I sing," she says. "I don't want to live in the worst night." Not everyone in the building listens with patience. Amandine's entourage whispers that Clemence's story is a prop, and shocked celebrity interns call her raw, which in their mouths means untrained and therefore interesting. The staff, driven by targets and focus groups, begin to murmur about narrative. They assign a chaperone to make sure she presents herself well. They offer vocal coaching and a stylist who fusses at her hair like it's a misplaced bird's nest. Pierre and Leia visit intermittently, as if the project matters to them beyond the flash of television. They sit in the audience during a rehearsal, watching not only the stage but the faces that cross it. Pierre's jaw tightens when he listens to Clemence hum in the green room. Leia's hand presses his with the gentleness of someone who has learned how to steady outbursts of grief with fingers. They tell her to rest. They look at her with the kind of steady kindness that would make a dentist's office seem like a refuge. At night, Clemence lies on the hard cot in the contestant dorm and hums the lullaby into the dark. The chorus of strangers breathing around her sounds like a city reduced to the scale of a room. Sometimes she imagines the chestnut tree and the river as real things to come back to, not as flimsy metaphors for safety. She dreams of a hand larger than hers smoothing her hair. Julien's visits are small rebellions against the polished world. He appears in the ticketing queue as if he had a right to be there, which he does, and watches from a uniformed distance. He has a small camera phone. He records a few seconds, which he says will make a good postcard for the street. He brings her a sandwich wrapped in foil that smells of anchovies, something of comfort and home. He insists on telling her every ridiculous thing that happens at the corner to make her laugh. "Mr. Raccoon stole Mrs. Delgado's muffin again," he announces once in a loud whisper. "The city keeps us humble." Clemence laughs. It is her practice laugh to keep from unraveling. There are moments where someone will try to make her into a narrative, the sad child who becomes a star, and she resists being neat. She has learned that tidy arcs are not honest. Life is sutured by rougher stitches. But she also knows music is sincere in a way stories are not. A chord can undo a lie. Behind the veneer of rehearsals there are fissures. The production needs to make a spectacle to hold an audience, and spectacle often requires a sacrificial figure. In the producers' meeting, a junior executive says the word no one says like a map, shock value. Martin makes a note in a notebook. He talks about the segments that land in conversation the next day, about how cruelty on screen is a currency if framed right.
It is a conversation that hums under the surface, the sort of thing that becomes policy because no one bothers to name it immoral out loud. Amandine, watching Clemence practice a song in a corridor, tilts her head and smiles with the practiced warmth of someone measuring how much she can take. "You should be grateful for the chance," she tells Clemence. "Some of us have worked for years to get into rooms like these." "Some of us have lived at the curb," Clemence says, quietly. It is less a retort and more a statement of fact. The words do not aim for pity. They are an inventory. A week passes in a blur. There are interviews to package and teaser clips to film. Amandine raises her voice at a vocal coach. Martin clamps his jaw when a focus group isn't satisfied with a trend line. Clemence's guitar begins to look like a character, its wood ringed with the same scratches the city wears. The strings buzz in a way that is honest and off-key at the same time. The sound engineer tells her to soften that grit, to round the edges. She tries, but the sound that comes from her chest lives partly in the scratch. One evening, when the lights are down low and the stage technicians are drinking lukewarm coffee in the wings, a young intern tells a story about how the producers sometimes spice things up. Nothing illegal, he assures anyone who will look at him. Just wow factors, a little theatricality, paint on the stage, a wardrobe malfunction, a splash of drama. Ratings love drama. The words hover in the air like steam. Clemence does not understand staging the way they mean it. For her, drama is the space between hunger and a meal. It's the stretch of the hand before someone else decides whether to return it. She thinks of the lullaby, the chestnut tree, and the river, and wonders if a staged moment could undo something real. Julien hears the word paint and frowns. He is suspicious of cleverness that smells like cruelty. "Are they going to make my story dirty?" she asks one night, the question spilling out like a coin she doesn't mean to spend. Leah sits beside her and tucks a blanket around Clemence's knees. "We are here to help you tell your truth," she says, "not to make it into something else." The show grows near. The bright, rehearsed faces, the confident camera operators, the clacking of heels. At the center of it all, a week before the live taping, Clemence stands in front of a practice microphone and the world reduces to the size of a chord. She chooses a lullaby, the one that sits like a warm stone under her ribs. She plucks the opening notes like someone opening a door gently. The guitar breathes. The technicians, out of habit, fall silent. Even Martin, who has watched thousands of auditions, tilts his head and simply listens. The song is small and personal. It has lines no one else probably remembers. "Under the chestnut tree, the river keeps its promises."
The phrase hangs in the practice room, and suddenly something about her voice is different. It is not the refinement work calls for, nor the novelty the interns hunger after. It is a voice carrying a life. The note bends like a reed. The room listens. When she finishes, no one knows how long they've been holding their breath. There is an audible, awkward pause that's not a courtesy, but a recalibration. Leia's eyes blot with wetness. Pierre covers his mouth with his hand, like a man hearing something from his children's past. Martin checks his watch and then shakes his head. more to himself than in disapproval. He is a man of measurement and stillness, and this was not what rang on his bell. "You have something," Leia says, as if comment could be a vessel that contains the enormity of what was heard. Clemence shrugs, unused to praise that isn't exchange. She thinks of the curb, of the woman who left stale bread by the lamppost, of Julien's hands. She thinks for a breath that this might be the beginning of something, or it might be a dangerous flaring up that will leave her ash and nothing to show for it. The edges of a possibility are always both hope and hazard. The producers ask for a taped segment about her life, a short montage to be aired during the show. They want the image of the guitar against the city. They ask for a day with a camera on the street to capture the real Clemence. She walks corners with a small crew, and someone tells her to look at the lens like it is a person who will keep secrets. She yawns politely and sings for coins like she always has, but now there is a lens that can freeze her and make her freeze as well. In the montage of her life, they show her in the street, guitar case open, hands moving like prayer. Someone packages her past into a neat, consumable clip, tired eyes, hunger lines, the guitar like a relic. The editor pairs the images with the lullaby, and the result is a piece that makes viewers ache for 2 minutes in a script-approved way. But behind the edits, trade-offs are being made. In a meeting that smells of espresso and deadlines, one of Martin's lieutenants suggests turning the audition into must-see television by giving them a memorable moment. Martin nods slowly. He is not a man who enjoys sloppy things. He likes his dramas engineered with a meticulous hand. "We need her to go through a crucible," he says, speaking as if he were referring to a stage prop and not a person. "If we can make the audience root for her, the ratings spike. If she stumbles and rises, people will speak of her for weeks." Julien will later call this phrase the wrong kind of prophecy. A week before the live broadcast, a production assistant in a gray hoodie drops a box of props near the set, cans of color, theatrical paints, bright and glossy.
They are supposed to be used for a commemorative confetti moment in another segment, someone explains. Innocent hands excusing the presence of bright plastic cans in a room of fragile people. No one ties the bright colors to any single contestant. They are, at first, only paint and idle possibility. Clemence practices between the lights. Her fingertips are raw from the metal of the strings, but she keeps playing because the guitar is an extension of a body that knows how to withstand being seen. The song she chooses for the live night is a new arrangement of the lullaby. She has been shaping it between subway rides and late-night rehearsals. It is honest and small and lives in the space between two chords. The night before something that will later be called the audition taping, the contestants are told that they'll have a short run-through in the main hall under the lights, a dress rehearsal that the crew treats as if it were the actual night. The studio is a cathedral of instruments and faces. The chairs are perfect, and the air smells like the last minute of readiness. Clemence stands in the wings with her guitar, Hart a drummer. Her fingers trace the scars on the wood. Somewhere inside of her is the image of the chestnut tree. She hums to calm the tremor that feels like hunger in her limbs. "You're ready," Leah whispers, and squeezes her wrist with a steadiness that keeps thudding hearts from skittering. "You don't have to be polished to be heard," Pierre tells her. Not in the voice of a businessman, but in that of someone who collects small mercies and hoards them like jewelry. There is a light in his eyes that suggests pockets of memory that have never quite fit into the life he built with Leah. He has an expression of a man used to making choices with global consequences, and yet he moves now like a father at a school recital. From the audience, the cameras suck in the glow. Martin checks levels, and his face is an exercise in concentration that looks almost parental. A crewman walks by holding a can of glossy paint with a label that reads Holiday Pop. It's absurdly cheerful in the stern room. Someone jokes about using it in a confetti cannon, and a laugh ripples through the techs. The joke hangs in the air like a pebble thrown into still water. It makes a few small ripples, and nothing more. Clemence walks on stage for the dress run. The studio lights fold around her like a brightness that is almost assaulting in its attention. For a heartbeat, the noise of the building outside the studio, the city's ordinary mercy and cruelty, is gone. The audience of rehearsers and staff claps politely. She breathes, and then she begins the lullaby. The song stretches. It opens like a small hand, and then grieves into something larger. For the first time in a week, she is not counting coins. She is counting pulses in the hall.
One human heart finding a sympathetic rhythm with others.
Her voice folds over the chords and makes the air feel thinner, not in a suffocating way, but in the way a window in winter brings clarity. Someone in the back of the room is holding a can of paint. He watches Clemence, and the pitch of his mouth changes in a way that no one notices except Julien, who happens to be in a corridor with a sandwich and a hope. Julien, who is not allowed near lights, hears the music in the walls and feels a drip of unease in his gut. He lingers at the edge of a doorway, far from the glossy faces and the coffee steam, because the rawness of the note pulls something in him toward caution. The rehearsal finishes. People clap with that polite professional rhythm. Leia steps forward, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Pierre approaches and squeezes Clemence's hand like someone making a vow. Martin nods at the soundboard, his mind already cataloging how the performance might fare under the harsh light of ratings. Nobody in that room says what is going to happen. Later, the people who plant seeds of scandal will tell each other it was always only television and only for a moment, and that the audience loved the turnaround. For now, it is only a moment of music, and Clemence is being congratulated on a job done well. She is equal parts exhausted and buoyant when she walks off the stage. Her guitar is heavier now in a way she cannot name. Behind a curtain, a stagehand with a navy cap wipes a spot of glitter from a prop. His hands are careful with the glitter as if it were a dangerous thing. He moves a container of theatrical paint and sets it out of sight. Julien meets her in the corridor with a face that looks like someone who has just run a long way and is out of breath. He wraps an arm around her shoulder and says, "They loved you." It is the sort of praise that tastes like bread in the mouth of a hungry child. She smiles. For a night's duration, she allows herself the belief in simple progress, a few minutes of light, perhaps a sandwich, perhaps an end to frostbitten toes. But there is a ripple that begins in the undercurrent of the building, a protocol implemented in hushed tones, a conversation that has the shape of a plan. Someone files a roster, someone cross-checks a segment, pieces move without spectacle. A bucket of something bright and liquid is placed near a rig and then covered. A crewman takes notes and slides the page into a folder. Eyes meet and then look away. Clemence does not know it yet, but on live television, there are parts of people that can be turned into spectacle with the same ease one uses to press a button. The studio hums with an electricity that tastes like caution. Martin, from his perch, watches the city lights beyond the glass, calculating. At the end of the dress run, the production assistant hands Clemence a small temporary card, call time for live taping, a wardrobe change, and a note to make sure she keeps the guitar case close.
She folds it into her pocket, as one folds a small map when you hope it leads to a home. She hums the lullaby to herself as she walks back to the dorm, because the notes steady her like a rope around a storm. Outside, the city has resumed its indifferent rhythm. A dog barks, a taxi coughs, and a vendor on the corner is selling piping hot bread. Julien hands her the sandwich he promises will change the shape of the night. She unwraps it slowly, as if it were a novel she's been waiting to read. The first bite tastes like salt and a promise, and the simplest grace she has known in months. She is tired, in that way that feels like a damp in her bones. She thinks of home as a place happening sometime in the future, not yet present. She thinks of the chestnut tree as if it were a real thing that exists somewhere beyond the city's edge, and wonders if the river will keep its promise. Above the hum of the city and the building's nearest air conditioning, a small group of producers cluster to finalize staging details for the televised night. Their conversation takes on a tone that is airy and practical. "We need a visual moment," someone says, "something to punctuate her moment, a low point that becomes a high point. People will speak of it. They'll love her rise." It is a phrase that sits in the air and tastes like control. It is the language of people who design rides. They talk about timing, about camera angles, about a fall and a redemption, and the necessary beat of humiliation. No one in the conversation says the word harm. No one says that a manufactured humiliation is different from living humiliation. They trade in narratives with the dispassion of accountants. Julien overhears a few stray words near a set of cables: showstopper, stunt, paint. He frowns, and his hands clench around the wrapper of his sandwich, like he is squeezing a thing until it changes shape.
He wants to say something, but he knows his place is outside the equation of cameras and call sheets. He wraps his arm around Clemence and says nothing. Silence is sometimes its own kind of protest. That night, Clemence dreams she is by a river, the chestnut branches wrestling. In the dream, a child calls to her from behind a tree, a child's laugh that is both familiar and new. She wakes with the chord in her mouth, the lullaby half sung, and a heartbeat that feels like the daylight of expectation. The live night is a day away. She believes with a child's weary kind of faith that the city might be generous in a way that is not cruel. When she arrives for the final preparations on the day of the airing, everything is polished down to the last second. Hair is set, makeup is applied, wardrobe alarms are silenced. Pierre and Leia sit in the audience like two quiet pillars, their silhouettes softened by the glow. They don't sit together, Leia to the right, Pierre to the left, as if they are each waiting to see what the other will see.
"Remember what you're singing," Leia tells Clemence before she steps out on stage. Her hand lingers on Clemence's shoulder with an intensity that is both protective and possessive of hope. Clemence nods and breathes. She feels small and enormous at once. She steps out into the bright, bare light. The cameras are teeth that will chew and then expect applause. The audience hums. Her fingers find the guitar as if they are remembering the instrument. From the wings, a stagehand shuts off a small camera. Someone moves a painted prop a few feet away. The bright cans of theatrical color are stacked behind a curtain like a secret waiting for its cue. A technician gives a thumbs up, that small sanctioned sign that everything is in place. In the booth, Martin adjusts his tie and smiles with the satisfaction of someone who believes he controls the weather. Clemence stands under the lights, and the city slips away. The microphone warms her voice like an honest lamp. She begins. The lullaby comes out like an answer, like the first note of sunrise. She plays, and in that first stretch, something in the hall changes. People who came for spectacle quiet down. The world seems to tilt toward this single small girl. Then, somewhere in the wings where stagehands move like props themselves, a radio crackles with a technician's voice. Someone adjusts a rig, a can of paint shifts. A whispered joke about making it memorable travels across the sockets of the studio like a current. Julien, far enough to not be a fixture on any shot but close enough to hear the chords, presses his fist into his palm until his nails are white. The song is building into the first chorus. Clemence's voice has the grit and gold of a life tempered by weather. The lullaby carries the specific phrase, "under the chestnut tree," and it rings with a private argument that the room is not supposed to understand. And then, before the rest of the world knows what has happened, something moves into motion that will force the studio and its many polite faces to choose between their appetite for spectacle and the dignity of a child on a stage. The lights cut to a brighter white for a moment, the camera swings, and the quiet before an expected accompaniment thickens into the kind of pause that makes audiences lean in. Clemence feels the shift like a draft on the back of her neck. Her hands do not falter. She keeps singing because music is what she knows how to do when the world threatens to make something of her she is not. But the moment has changed into a hinge, and behind the curtain, something slick and bright is being readied. Outside the lights hum, the studio waits, and for a second the world holds its breath. The world holds its breath. For a beat longer than a beat, light and silence crowd the studio like a tide. Clemence's fingers hover over the strings. Her palm is slick with sweat. The guitar smells faintly of old street rain and the caramel of the sandwich Julien gave her. The lullaby wraps the room, a small ship in a vast, dark sea. Faces soften, cameras lean forward. Then, without fanfare, the rig above the stage shudders. Bright liquid, too bright for anything honest, drops in a dizzy sheet. It splashes across the wood of the guitar, hissing as though it were breathing fire. It catches the studio lights and becomes a living, laughing thing as it arcs across Clemence's skirt and shoulders. The paint is theatrical, neon, glossy, absurdly cheerful. It lands on her hair, rounds her cheek like a mocking halo, puddles into the creases of the instrument she cradles, as if it were a bowl of mercy. There is an outburst, laughter like a chain reaction, a sound that understands where cruelty and ratings converge. Some laughs are embarrassed, some are delighted. A few cameras catch the fallen glinting in the lamplight. The audience is for a moment a living thing, rapt and entitled, hungry for spectacle. Clemence freezes under the weight of it, cold paint seeping down her arms, strings slick with color. The studio's sterile perfume of hairspray and coffee fogs her senses. For one jagged second, she is every child who ever hoped, and then found that hope to be a trick. The guitar slips, a sound like a small animal trying to speak, and the world leans in to see if it will break. Her chest tightens. A memory comes not as a sentence, but as a taste. Julien pressing a cloth into her hand in the car, his fingers rough and sure.
the rag tucked into the case like a talisman, the lullaby, the little private line under the chestnut tree, Julien's voice. Make them stop and listen. He had joked, but the joke was a prophecy. Something else happens too, a sound from somewhere behind the scenes that doesn't match the stage rhythm. A clatter of the can, footsteps hurried, a whisper. A backstage technician's face is visible for a flicker in a corridor camera, and his eyes are not gleeful. They are suddenly guilty. Martin watches from his booth, a small smile that could be sympathy or ownership. He has made the decision and allowed it to happen, because television eats those arcs alive. Humiliation, then redemption. He expects the show to bend the moment into a narrative that will be clipped and replayed until the outrage is a currency that buys him the next big slot. But what Martin does not measure are the human currents that run faster than a schedule can contain. Julien, who had been pressed to the shadows of the building like a pocket of stubborn heat, has not left his post near the corridor. In the moments after the paint falls, he stumbles toward the wing with a phone that shakes in his hand. He had filmed the rehearsal. He had caught the cans being moved, the conspiratorial glances, that same mechanic laughing as he carried a can of holiday pop behind a prop. Julien's fingers are clumsy but quick. He streams the footage to a dozen apps, to a handful of people, to a friend who knows how to make a clip breathe on the internet.
On stage, the laughter curls into something uglier. Comments, applause, a stray call for security. A few people stand. The bright light is harsh against the paint. Someone else's hand finds a cloth in the front row and tosses it toward Clemence like pity in motion. For a second, the world is a ring of people watching an animal in a cage. Clemence could run. She could vanish into the wings and let the story they planned wash over her like a tide. Her mind offers the practical shapes of survival. Leave, hide, get warm. Do not be the spectacle. It gives her small, tidy survival choices. But sound is a muscle she has trained to trust. Her voice is the currency she was born to spend. She exhales, steadies her left hand across strings bleeding with paint, and decides to spend it. The first note is not meant to be loud. It is a clean, deliberate sound, a thread pulled through the clatter. For a second, the room thinks it will be another stunt, someone trying to make art from indignity. Then her voice expands. It is raw and clear, and so utterly itself that the auditorium folds around it. The paint on her clothes becomes a ridiculous apostrophe to the truth. Nothing that dramatic can touch what is honest. The world goes quiet in the way an ocean goes glass still before a storm. Phones lower. Cameras keep rolling because professionals cannot help themselves, but the people holding them find they have held their breath without permission. Clemence sings the lullaby again, the lines stitched in her voice like a seam. Under the chestnut tree, the river keeps its promises, she sings, and then, with a curve of melody that has never been taught on a lesson plan, she adds a line that has been a private pledge all her life. In the audience, Pierre's hand clamps the armrest so tight the knuckles shine. Leah raises her palm to her mouth as though to stop a flood. The couple who gave her the card are suddenly utterly small in their seats, smaller than the child whose voice passes before them like a map. Leah feels a tremor of recognition in the way a buried thing remembers the surface. She hums under her breath, not audibly at first, an involuntary return to a tune she had sung 1,000 nights ago while a child slept at her chest. It is the same lullaby, but with a cadence only their family used. In the third verse, Clemence places a half-breath at a moment that is not in any public version of the song. It is a private pause, a little unexpected inhale that the couple's child once preferred. Leah's eyes flood as if the memory were a storm overtaking a dry plain. This is not only a melody, it is a domestic lock being fitted to its key. Pierre's gaze drops involuntarily to the inside of Clemence's wrist as she bends to reach a chord. There, pale against the wet paint, is a crescent-shaped scar, an imperfect moon carved long ago when childhood met something sharp.
In the photograph he keeps in his pocket, the child who disappeared years before has the same small crescent on her wrist. His breath catches. He and Leah exchange a look that needs no words and yet says everything. Recognition is a strange, sudden thing. For Pierre, it is a cyclone of memory, a hospital room, Leah singing softly, the way their daughter's hair smelled like rain. For Leah, it is the return of a voice that she has called into the dark in the desperate hours. Their seats become a prop of revelation. They are seated in the front third as patrons, as music moguls used to judging others, but now they are only parents on the verge of reclaiming what slipped away. Martin, in his booth, watches the headlong turn of the room and his calculation falters. He had intended for the paint to be a machine. He had not accounted for the keys of blood and memory. He scowls, fists tightening, because a narrative is a delicate engine, and sometimes it misfires into something real. Something else fractures the control he clings to. Julien's clip hits the web. Someone in the booth, an assistant who has a conscience that cannot be purchased, hides behind a monitor and watches as notifications multiply. The cameraman who had joked about confetti now sees himself on the screen for what he was, a man moving cans, a man smiling as if he had made an arrangement for spectacle. Within minutes, the clip is on multiple platforms, paired with the live feed, and people begin to write the story for themselves. Cruelty on live television, a child humiliated, those responsible named. In the stands, a murmuring swells into a human wave. A few initially amused audience members stiffen. One woman rises and walks down the aisle toward the stage, a movement like a single domino. Others follow. A chorus of disapproval builds, not orchestrated but organic, fed by something more ancient than ratings. Our unease when a crowd becomes a jury without context. Someone in the audience, the same woman who had once thrown a cloth, gets up and plants herself before the stage, hands outstretched toward Clemens. The studio applauds the gesture, and the applause is not for spectacle but for decency. Pierre and Leah do not hesitate. Leah has always been the quicker mover in private matters. She stands first, slipping past surprised ushers and a security guard who looks as though he has been told to expect surprises. She is at the stage edge in 2 strides, a soft authority in a world dominated by glare. Pierre arrives seconds later, breathless, eyes wet, and when he reaches Clemens, neither of them ask permission. Leah kneels and lifts Clemens's pain-splattered chin with a tenderness that makes cameras pause in their rationale. Her fingers are warm and certain. "Ma chérie," she says, a single word loaded with a whole geography of grief. It lands in Clemens's ears and unlocks a room where years of unnameable things have been stored.
Clemence stopped singing for a moment, as if the music on the stage has finally collided with the music inside her. Her hands still on the strings, she looks at the woman and the man and finds something impossible. Recognition coming from those who had been kind without explanation. Leia's eyes search Clemence's face, then fall to the crescent scar, and she sobs. Not theatrical, not anchored to camera angles, but a raw, small grief unraveled from the inside. "It's her," Pierre says simply, the words both command and confession. He calls a name into the din that Clemence knows only by the paper in her coat. Clemence. It lands strange and familiar. He says it again, and this time the syllables fit as if sewn into her. On the stage, the atmosphere turns from performance to collapse. The audience is up in a matter of heartbeats. People cry, people curse. A woman calls for Martin's head with more specificity than the crowd's earlier uncategorizable noise. Social feeds explode. Hashtag echo stage scandal trends. Clips are shared. Commentary multiplies. Martin scrambles. His smile collapses into a thin line. He looks like a man whose props have turned on him. He tries to speak into a microphone, to manufacture an apology. The sound that comes out is cracked and unconvincing. Those in his inner circle avert their faces. Sponsors' logos flash on the screens in the wings, changeable images that could be turned off, and an assistant's hands tremble as they scan messages from partners who text words like concerned and pause. Meanwhile, Clemence continues to sing, though the lullaby has unraveled into something larger, a new song threaded through the first. Each note she gives becomes a stitching of a life pulled back from the edge. Leah hums along without intention, and Pierre, who rarely succumbs to public displays, reaches out and lays his hand against Clemence's paint-streaked wrist, feeling the small crescent of skin. The contact is a tether. Then, in a motion that feels both clumsy and ordained, Leah takes off the small pendant she always carries, a locket with a faded photograph inside. She holds the locket open and shows it to Clemence like an offering. The photo is grainy, a little girl under a chestnut tree, hair loose, fingers curled around an adult's hand. The photograph is a timepiece of a life before the storm. Leah presses it to Clemence's forehead with a laugh that turns into a sob. "You have our song," Leah whispers. "You have the mark." The shoeshine boy who had been watching from a distance, Julien, drops against a pillar and breathes with a relief that is almost physical. He exults quietly, the way a survivor smiles when rescue arrives, because in his film-rattled heart he has always known what the cards could do when matched right. He slides his phone into his pocket and watches the crowd rearrange itself into a choir of justice. Outside the studio, news vans arrive like a sudden rain of black cabs. The clip Julien posted spreads through networks that do not need official sanction to be heard. Within hours, hashtags are a map of moral outrage. Commentators debate the ethics of reality entertainment. Sponsors issue terse statements about reviewing partnerships. Activists organize watch parties and call for the ouster of those who benefited from manufactured humiliation. In the studio, the producer's domain is undone, as if someone has yanked a tablecloth. Martin, whose empire is built on the art of shaping pain into buzz, sees his control slip. He tries to salvage the moment by delivering a prepared line about the show and unexpected events. The camera on him cuts to a corporate shot where a PR advisor whispers into his ear. He will not, in the story, be named a criminal by the legal system without cause, and the narrative does not pretend to pass sentence. Yet the court of public opinion is fierce, and in this story it moves fast. A cascade of boardroom calls, a suspension of contracts, an executive exit staged to look like mutual separation. The show cuts to commercial break in the most literal way. The producers scramble, sponsors pull back, and networks begin an internal audit. Some of that aftermath happens quickly and loudly. Other parts filter slow. Contracts renegotiated, an internal investigation opened, cameras rewired to capture their own complicity. But for Clemence, in the first bruising wash of it, time condenses into a handful of breathless moments on stage. Leia's hands drying paint from her hair with kindness, Pierre asking gently for the story of the scrap of paper sewn into her coat, and Clemence naming the name she has carried, her name, and realizing it is the same name printed in the locket's ledger years ago. They escort her backstage, not as a contestant now, but as a daughter. Security, who moments before might have pulled her off for public disturbance, is now an apologetic shadow. A camera keeps rolling because news wants edges, and the network cannot help itself. The footage will be edited and replayed until it means something else in the hearts of strangers who watch from the safety of their living rooms. But here, behind the stage, there is only the pulsing of a human reconnection. In the days that follow, the events become headlines. Social platforms are a pressure chamber. Julien, who had uploaded the rehearsal clip with no grand strategy, becomes a small catalyst in the story of the studio's implosion. Interviews are requested. He declines most, letting the story around Clemence remain centered for a time. He does, however, do something practical. He shows up at Leia and Pierre's home, not as a petitioner, but as someone who knows where the garbage bins are kept, where to fold a napkin, how to make a coffee the way Clemence prefers it. They see in him loyalty, a different kind of resource, and offer him a place to belong.
Martin faces the immediate business consequences of a world that does not admire manufactured cruelty. In the narrative, his future is a combination of resigned retreat from public platforms and the quiet negotiation that becomes the story for those in power after a scandal. Reviews, apologies, a time of being watched. The show, Echo Stage, undergoes an overhaul. Segments that once celebrated humiliation are excised. Its PR team constructs the language of learning and accountability. The studio hosts forums about ethics. In private, executives puzzle over the lesson that audiences crave authenticity more than curated cruelty. In public, the show rebrands and attempts to make amends. The story does not imagine neat revenge, only that the structure of power that allowed the moment is forced to reckon. For Clemence, the immediate effect is tenderness and care. Leah refuses to let her return to the downtown corner. Pierre sends for a cleaner and a friend who is a luthier. "We will fix the guitar," Pierre says, as if it is the smallest and most sacred of promises. The luthier is a quiet woman who works at a shop on a sunny street and treats instruments like old friends. She takes the guitar with a reverence that makes Clemence laugh once, the kind of honest sound that lives somewhere under great stress, and then begins to restore the wood, to replace strings, to sand away the paint as if peeling back a skin. There are practicalities. The couple cannot, in an afternoon, replace years of tough nights with easy endings. Paperwork moves like syrup, and legal processes tangle. But the story is a narrative of salvage as much as change. Pierre and Leah begin the steps toward making a legal arrangement. They consult lawyers with soft eyes and ask questions about custody and care. But the public arc of adoption in this story is a choice taken with the weight of care rather than as a barreled transaction. They open their home to Clemence as parents do when a child needs anchoring. Quiet meals, a room with curtains, a small chest where they place things they think will be useful, a warm blanket, a toothbrush, a thin book of poems that Leah loved as a child. Julien is welcomed into this new orbit not merely as a guest, but as a person who shaped a life. He gets a small job with one of Pierre's community projects, a program the couple funds which helps young people find training in music and trades. It is not princely. It is work with dignity, managing equipment, cleaning rehearsal spaces, occasionally polishing a pair of shoes in a way that makes him beam. They do not erase his street smarts. Instead, they give him the tools to translate them into stability. As for Clemence, the first weeks are a collage of small, enormous things. She learns how to live without fear of being laughed at by people in lights. She learns to accept comfort without guilt.
She also learns the complex language of media attention, reporters at the gate, photographers at a respectful distance, conversations that feel like interviews but are actually gentle interrogations of her own grief. Leah stands close,
but she never takes control of Clemence's voice. She encourages Clemence to sing when she wants and to be quiet when she does not. The couple signs the necessary papers when it is right for the child and not for the headlines. They let lawyers and social workers do their jobs, mindful of the story's need to remain humane. News cycles churn. There are sympathetic think pieces about the perils of reality TV, sharp op-eds about the exploitation of vulnerability, and a few breathless celebrity pundits who attempt to massage the narrative into easy moral shapes. But the core of the story remains stubbornly small. A girl who sang, a couple who recognized a song from the inside of their grief, a friend who would not be silent. People send gifts, blankets, guitars, little cards, in boxes that pile by the door of the couple's house. They read some, they display others, and the small kindnesses become a mosaic of communal empathy. Months later, after hearings and forms and many slow, sure conversations, the adoption is finalized. The detail of legal files and signatures is not dramatized in the narrative. Instead, the scene is simple. A quiet signing on a sunlit afternoon in a small office, a clerk smiling in the way clerks do when they witness a tidy human moment. When the final stamp hits paper, Clemence cries. No more the exhausted tears borrowed from the night, but clean, astonished tears. Leah wraps her in an embrace that smells like lavender, and something older, the smell of a life finally anchored. The guitar, restored, is returned to her with new strings and the rough edge of its body smoothed out. The luthier has carved a tiny crescent into the inside rim, an embellishment not of ownership but of acknowledgement. Pierre and Leah present the instrument to her like a christening present. Clemence runs her hand over the wood as if it were a friend recovering from illness. She plays a few notes, and those who have watched the arc know that the sound is both the same, and also a new timbre, weathered and hopeful. A public performance comes after, the kind that is structured around talent and not humiliation. Echo Stage, transformed and under scrutiny, invites Clemence back for a charity gala where proceeds go to youth music programs. The network frames the event as reparation. Clemence agrees to perform not because she owes anywhere an exploit, but because she wants to reclaim a stage on her terms. She chooses songs not to manipulate sympathy, but to give the truth of her voice room to breathe. The villain, Martin, sits in the periphery of that night, stripped of some contacts and bearing the thin sheen of a man who has watched his architecture of control crumble.
He offers a remark about lessons learned, because that is what men in his position do. Sponsors sign statements about zero tolerance and ethical practices, and a few new faces are introduced to the production team, people with kindness and rules to follow. Clemence's rise is not miraculous as some headlines might puff it. It is steady and human. She signs with a small label that believes in honest music. She records songs that taste like the corners of her life, lullabies and street chords, and a cover of an old city tune Julien used to whistle while shining shoes. Her first album is modestly successful, not instant Billboard domination, but loved in places that value voice and story. She does benefit from the visibility of the scandal, but mostly she benefits from being finally allowed to practice her craft with resources that make practice humane, a place to rehearse, a voice coach who keeps her grounded, and a team that listens. Julien is a constant, always there with a grin, sometimes slipping her a sandwich backstage, always the place where her life remembers how it started. He finds work with the community program Leah and Pierre fund. He helps set up small concerts, tutors kids in rhythm, and occasionally tours with Clemence as the person who makes sure her shoes are clean and her smile honest. In return, the couple provides him with a roof and the chance to learn a trade through apprenticeships. It is not patronage wrapped in smugness. It is practical support for a human being who is fiercely loyal and quietly kind. The public, who once leaned in to watch a spectacle, now leans in to listen. People write to the couple with stories of their own missing pieces and small reconciliations. A social movement quietly emerges, a series of local groups that offer legal and emotional support for people who have been turned into content. It is not a revolution, but it is a change in tone. There are difficult nights still, moments of panic when the old corners of the city look like sirens calling, nights when Clemence draws a bath and remembers the grit of the curb under her feet. Leah sits with her in those evenings and listens. Pierre, practical and deliberate, teaches her how to draft a simple budget and how to trust someone with a checkbook. They are imperfect parents in the private sense. They make mistakes and say sorry and keep trying. One morning, nearly a year after the night of the paint, Clemence returns to the corner where she had once sung for pennies. She goes not because she needs coins, nor because she seeks the flash of pity, but because there are places that own pieces of a person, in the way maps keep the shape of routes. Julien stands beside her as he always did, shoeshine tin open at his feet, hands steady. They sit on the curb together with the old guitar propped between them.
A small crowd forms, not hostile, not merely curious, but sincere. Some faces she knows, neighbors who had once dropped stale bread, and new ones too.
She sings the lullaby she had always hummed, the one that had unlocked a life, but she changes the last line. Where once it was a plea, now it reads like a promise. "If I sing well, will you feed me?" she had once asked, half ironically, half begging on a city street. The question had been a way of measuring the world. Can art pay for a meal? That day, with the guitar fixed and her voice full of the weather she has known, she sings, and the words that follow are not a literal plea, but a testimony of the full reclamation of a life. She sings instead, "If I sing well, will you feed me? With bread, with shelter, with a home." The answer around her is a chorus of hands clapping and people dropping coins and small bills into the case. But there is more. There are offers of help, envelopes of support, and invitations to play in local venues that trust without spectacle. Later that evening, as twilight coats the city in forgiving blue, she sits at the table in Leah and Pierre's kitchen. The house is full of the ordinary absurdities of family life. A pot on the stove, a radio playing faint news, a dog that insists on claiming a lap. Julien leans back in a chair and tells a story so silly it makes them all laugh. Clemence reaches for the guitar by the door and plays a soft chord, then a softer one, and finally the lullaby that had been the key to their story. She looks up at Leah across the room, and Leah mouths the first line of the song, a private echo that only they share. They both laugh, small, human giggles that have no audience but themselves. On the mantel, the locket with the photograph rests open. It is no longer a relic of loss, but a witness to something that stitched a life back together. As the night winds down, Clemence takes the little rag Julien had given her, the same rag folded into the guitar case that had always smelled faintly of the corner where they used to sit, and she tucks it into the drawer of the kitchen table. It is a small ritual, a way of honoring the past without letting it live in every room. The story of that night on television becomes legend in small corners of the web and a talking point in media studies classes. Documentaries discuss spectacle and ethics. Late-night hosts reference the incident. But in the private rooms where real change matters, community centers, recording studios, small apartments, what happens is quieter and more durable. Music programs funded, protections for contestants drafted into policy, and a renewed public conversation about spectacle and human dignity. Clemence's life is not a fairy tale that erases the street. The city still exists with its indifferent currents, and people still have to learn how to be kind to one another. But she has been given the rarest of things, an anchor and the means to steer by her own music. Months later, in a small interview that does not try to milk the drama, a reporter asks Clemence, "What do you want most now?"
She thinks of the chestnut tree in her lullaby and the river that keeps its promises. She thinks of Julien's hands and of Leah's quiet strength. She answers simply, "A life where my voice can be mine." And then, with a half smile that carries the whole of her journey, she repeats the line that started it all, not as a plea, but as a memory. "If I sang well, would you feed me?" She pauses and finishes, voice soft, steady. "They fed me more than a meal. They fed me a home." If this story moved you, leave a comment about the moment that touched you most, and consider watching the next emotional story now. The lights dim around them. The guitar on Clemence's lap hums a final note that holds both the echo of the curb and the promise of a stage. Outside, the city keeps its noises, but inside that warm kitchen, the music finds a room to live in, and a family who will listen.